I'm Ron, this is my 430 Scuderia. I am changing the clutch, and this is the gearbox side. I'm about to change things over here. Now first off, the special tool here for the end of stroke pins, or bolts or studs, whatever you want to call them, is $235. Is to reach two bolts behind on the flange. As you can see, it's kind of awkward. Well, I've got a standard crow's foot here on an extension, and I got the bottom bolt loose with it and can do the bottom bolt, so that leaves the top bolt. I've got it on there. Let's see if I have enough room to crack it, because it's a little tight in there. I'll show you the camera in there in a second. Get this off of there. I'm going to lift up the camera, try to point it in there. Hopefully you can see where the crow's foot is on that. Taking the crow's foot out. You see the bolt in there and the stroke bolt. Put the crow's foot back in and seeing if I can loosen it up. It's a little tight. Let me move the camera back. Give myself some more space, and I'll just show you that down underneath. We basically have the same thing, but I'm able to reach that fully with the crow's foot for sure. And doing about well, as you can see, that much turn quite easily. And I'll have enough room to torque this one back up. So let me see if I can get back to the top one. Broken it. A little awkward getting it in there. Doesn't look like there's enough space to get to it, because it's a 6-sided bolt and a basically 2-sided wrench here. I can't get in there. I'll be lucky if I'm torquing it at the same spot, so it might be difficult. I might be able to get something else in there and reach it like a long pair of needle nose pliers to grab the tip of it, but I can't grab enough of it now to turn unless I grind some of this down, which is a possibility as well. Get this out of here. It would be rounding off these corners, especially that one, kind of like this is rounded off. Alright, let's stop. Okay, so before I can fully remove the thrust bearing, I gotta remove this position sensor with two 4mm hex bolts there, because the pin from the Hall effect sensor is coming out into that bracket there, that mounting, plastic mounting. So I'm going to get that out of there first. 4mm hex, two of them. I broke this one already. And straight in, just gets by the bearing. There we go. Yeah, okay. Couple of more turns. There's a tiny washer on each one of these bolts. And that doesn't. Now the whole thing slides out, pop, pop. And now I'm dripping fluid. A little bit of F1 fluid dripping out. You hear it. And it's just about to stop now. There's the end of stroke pin. Got the springs. And we'll check things out. Alright, to release the thrust bearing, throw-out bearing, I had to undo the two, it was a 4mm hex bolts for the position sensor bracket, and then I was able to slide it off once I gave myself a little slack with the cable of that, which of course is going away anyway with the new one. But what we've got now is, let me position myself, that the magnet won't come through with the opening here. Looks like the position sensor needs to come off. And, well, it's going to need to come off anyway for the new one to go on. So these are 3mm hex here. The problem is that might be stripping them. The toughest ones are always the smallest, last little things. So let me continue on that. Alright, now I'm taking out the flange, the last two bolts. Let me get this to remove. Okay, I've got the bolts off the flange, and I gave it a little push here, and now it'll slide right off. Looking in there at some round bushing. You can see ball bearings in there. Here's my two little O-rings that I'm going to be replacing where my F1 fluid's coming out. Move the clutch and clean things up. Again, no sign of those spacers, but everything else here looked pretty good. Okay, now I'm at the gearbox side of the clutch change, and I'm going to see if I can do all this work while the sun is still out and I've got the garage door open. Got all the parts and tools in front of me, I hope, and I got this workshop manual. And starting right off, it says it has a spec for the springs, uncompressed, compressed, etc. I think I mentioned that in an earlier video. And this is a little bit bigger, just a little bit, than what's spec there, but that's the way it is. There's also talk about this spacer. When I took off the old flange, behind it was this very thin, it's actually 0.1 millimeter spacer. And it was on here in front of the ball bearings. I'll pull this cover off. You can see the ball bearings in here, I hope. I'll turn on this light for a second. Okay, and the spacer was on there. Now, in the workshop manual, there's a whole half page here on measuring and a quick subtraction form to find out if you need more spacers. And that depends if your new flange or your old flange, if for any reason, deviates. They tell you to measure from this surface to the outside race of the bearing, that depth, and the same corresponding depth on the flange, and then you need at least one spacer, and if you need any more than that, you do it, but I don't need any more than that. Okay, so now we're going to try to start putting things together, starting off with the little teeny O-rings here for the clutch fluid to pressurize and release pressure from the clutch into the flange from the gearbox right here. They have a little bit of F1 fluid dripping out of it right now. I'm just going to use that to help lubricate them as I put these two little O-rings back, new ones, in place. Okay. Now, it's important to note, I've seen other things happen here. I've seen other people doing this on the web use a thread locker for the stud bolts and the other two bolts that go through the flange. And specifically the service manual, workshop manual, says to use a thread sealant, which corresponds with the white goop I found in the thread holes here as I took everything apart. Thread sealant. You do use a thread lock, medium thread lock, when you're putting together the assembly for the clutch position sensor. So, that said, let's start to put this back together by slipping the flange over here. Okay, now this is going to end up pushing all the way in, and there you go, a little pop. Okay, now line up the holes the best I can. It looks like it's pretty close there. Okay. Now the whole question is, do I need that special tool, or can I do it with crow's feet, etc.? And I've got a new crow's foot to try here. We'll see. I did see that the bottom one I can do with the crow's foot. Absolutely can do with a stock 13mm crow's foot. The other one, top one, I wasn't patient enough to keep waiting. Since I had the special tool, I used it. But I might have been able to loosen off the bracket for the position sensor out of the way enough to use it in there. I'm not sure, a crow's foot in there. So I'll take a quick look to see if I can figure that out. All right, let me grab the position sensor. All right, in front of shadows and everything, I'm back with the position sensor here and the mounting bracket. Mounting bracket ends up going there. It's the only way to get things done here. One way to do it is you have to get, the only way to do it is first get the position sensor by itself through this opening here. Okay, that's the first step. Once it's in here, you can actually start, you can slide it in position on the mounting bracket, and you can see that it really only goes one direction and overhangs a little bit when it's mounted there. So you get one of these 3mm hex head bolts, which I got new ones since I stripped one of the old ones, and you can get it started. But you can't get it too tight because the magnet holder will not slide through, which I'll show you in a minute. That's not really going in there. There we go. Beautiful. In the thread right, but I still have some opening. Okay, so here it is. Throw out bearing. Little F1 fluid on it there. Okay, so now you'll see that it's going to end up going that way, and so that needs to go on there, but it can only go on there when there's enough space the way it has to get by there. And now once it's there, I can tighten up those on top, one or both. Let's see here. I'll start with my hand piece here. Okay. Clutch position sensor is in place. Let's see if we can slide this on. There we go. Partial push. Try to line it up a little bit more. There we go. See that? That's why we do this first. Even though they don't really specify that, and that's what I'm going to do is get these guys in there first. Okay, sleeve is pushed in a bit. Bolts are pushed down a bit. Okay, and let's try to put this back together. Humpty Dumpty. It's not a problem, just put it back on there. with that said, there we go. Okay. That feels like it's catching something. Let's pretend we're using a crow's foot here. Okay, that'll definitely work all the way in. That's a different crow's foot. I don't know about the top side. Let's get that started, because I don't have this mount in place yet. So I could pull it back a little bit away. I'll move the camera over here once I get there. Feels like that's started. Now let's get the springs in place, and then we'll try tightening things up. So, start with the lower spring and spacer. Spacer's in, spring's on it. Push the spring in. Get it to go in there, perfect. Okay. Now we've got the other spacer and the other spring from the top side. Which is not going to want to go in too easily here. Let's see how I'm going to hold this in place. I can do it with my fat fingers. It's in place. Let me push this in. Get it into the thrust bearing. Come on. That's not in the hole. There we go. There we go. And one more push. There we go. All right, let's try this. Well, let's see here. It's pretty picky. Let's see what we're doing. All right. Turn it all the way to the right. I hit the spring off. Can I catch it? Yes, I can. Spring. So it looks like I might use this with a ratchet handle and pull it out and get it on there. So let me show you with the camera. I'm going to try to hold the camera over here. Okay. Now that I'm stuck over the bolt, there we go. Get in there, on there. Turn it all the way. Get it out. Like I said, turn it all the way. Pull it out. Get it on again. So that works. And then we can put this back. Great. I'm going to tighten things up. Just a quick to show you here, I'm using just a universal and a 13mm socket to to get to this 2 regular bolts here. Not the end of stroke studs, obviously, but for these guys, I can do it simply with a stiff universal so that it holds up the socket and gets it on there and tighten it up, which I've already done on there. So, an update. Continuing with the crow's foot now on the anti-stroke pins. Okay, so just before I torque everything up, I'm going to put some thread lock, medium strength, Vermatex medium strength thread lock on these bolts that hold the clutch position sensor bracket to the gearbox. So I'm doing a little bit of that right now, making a little bit of a mess down here. So just a touch of thread lock around there. I don't think it's looking for much. Try to get it started in there with a 4mm hex head. Okay. Now I'll go ahead and get these in there and go from there. Okay, so one last note about the torques here. The 2 little screws for the mounting bracket for the position sensor get torqued to only 1.2 Newton meters, which I have converted to inch-pounds on my little guy here. Then the 2 anti-stroke bolts are 18 Newton meters, and then the 2 small bolts are 25 Newton meters. And that's according to the workshop manual. And that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so now it's all done. All bolted up and ready to go. I push on the flange bearing. It takes a little effort here to get to the right position. And there it goes. Back and forth. And I bolt marked all the bolts, and I'm all done. Now that I'm done with the gearbox side of the clutch change, I'm done with everything. And normally I would be putting the box back together, but I've got some other work to do before that happens. So before that happens, it's going to be a little while.